The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by two guests. I'm going to be joined by Joe Abeln and Gina Baldwin. Joe is from Allstaff Group, and Gina is from Felons, who we are going to talk to about the SLAM Industry Group, which is a part of MHI. And you see Gina there giving the old slam on the video. We love the name there. Very great name to have, right? But we're going to talk about exactly what does SLAM mean, what does it stand for, right? Because it's an acronym. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how it kind of situates within the warehouse workflow and how we can leverage some different solutions and opportunities to be a little more sustainable within the warehouse, particularly within that SLAM workflow as well. So Joe and Gina, welcome to the show. How are you both?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to get you both on. Happy to talk about this. I think this is a very interesting part of the warehouse in a sense. And I think the approach and focus to sustainability, I think we'll find out today. There's a lot of potential opportunity there and some interesting things going on, which we'll learn about. So I guess, Joe, why don't you kick us off here for people that are maybe don't know what SLAM stands for and what it really encompasses within the operation and warehouse. Kind of enlighten us here and tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So SLAM stands for specifically scan, label, apply, manifest. It was really coined by Amazon, I think, back as the automation leader in our industry, but it's really been adopted by anyone that has a fulfillment center, e-commerce distribution, really any warehouse that is fulfilling orders, getting product out the door. A SLAM line is a part of that process. So part of the SLAM process, another way to think about it, is it's the last 100 feet before it goes out the door. So you're scanning a product, you print and apply a label, often a shipping label. So that's the label and apply part of the acronym. And then the manifest, right? So that includes perhaps a sortation system, getting it onto the truck. So it's that last bit of the product life cycle right before it exits the warehouse. Gina, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there.
Well, I would just say selfishly, packaging is a part of that as well.
Yes, of course.
But it's just not tied into the acronym. So really what we're looking at is everything after the order's been picked until it gets out the door. But Joe's completely accurate in describing where it came from and the general sense of SLAM. But as a group, I would say all of our member companies are in little bits and pieces, SLAM or silent packaging SLAM line as well.
Silent packaging. I was thinking in my head like splam, slamp. Like where would you put the P in there? Interesting, but yeah, I mean, I think very very important note there, Gina. Of course, because when you talk about the label and apply, right? I mean, what are you putting that label on in a sense, right? Some type of packaging, right? Has to be so that last 100 feet there, as you said, within the DC, and obviously a critical component of the overall warehouse workflow. I mean, I often say on the podcast here that your warehouse in general and your operations people, they're like your last line of defense for the business, right? I mean, they're the last people that are going to touch that product before it gets to your customer. And from the SLAM perspective, I mean, that's literally like the last line of defense, right, before that's going out the door. So I guess tell us from your perspective, and I guess the industry group's perspective, I mean, how much importance does this SLAM process in the workflow? I mean, how much importance does that hold for not only just the operation, the warehouse itself, but I guess just the business in general?
Yeah, I can start off here. I would say historically, a lot of times fulfillment centers focus on automating the picking area, and the packaging and slam lines kind of stay manual. And really, then that can lead into some bottlenecks of actually getting the order out the door, just like you said. And that still plays a huge role from a customer perspective of just demanding orders to come even faster. And so, even though you might be able to pick the order really fast, there still has to be a focus when it comes to the end of line and getting the orders out the door. But in terms of, okay, what does this space mean to the customer and from a business standpoint? It's what allows you to make sure that you're shipping the correct order to the right person because of how you're labeling it accurately and also doing some scanning verification. It's the area that ensures the order arrives undamaged because you're using the accurate packaging materials because for each product. And from my perspective, e-commerce and the unboxing experience, that plays a huge role when it comes to repeat purchases and brand loyalty. So even though they've already placed the order, if you're not able to, in this last 100 feet of fulfillment, put everything together in the correct way, what the customer is expecting, or even over excel and meet their expectations, then that could impact your future business.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great point there because, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, I think all around is give that consumer the best experience possible. And I think we've all gotten a bad package in our lives, I'm sure, and that's not a very great experience at all. And as you mentioned, the SLAM part of the workflow is certainly, a big factor in making sure that happens there. And I think there's a lot of things going on in that area, right? And there's a lot of opportunity to not only be more efficient, more productive, doing things there, but there's also very high volume moving through that, especially from like an e-commerce operation perspective. And I know, Joe, you mentioned Amazon kind of coining this term, and obviously they're doing a ton of volume, right? I'm sure we see out there. But, that high volume moving through there, I think lends itself to a lot of potential opportunity, right? And part of the SLAM too, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is label in a sense, right? Which is traditionally like some kind of paper or something like that. But, if we look at high volume moving through the fulfillment center and ultimately moving through the SLAM part, how does that kind of increase the opportunity maybe for potential issues around sustainability, and then I guess maybe also opportunities to be more sustainable too, because you have such a high impact from that high volume. So Gina, you want to tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities, or I guess the issues maybe we'll start with first?
Yeah, I would say the issues tend to come from being more of a manual process, since it is heavily operator driven. So with that, you have somebody that might put too much void fill or too little. The need for at pack out stations needing to stock a wide variety of box and bag sizes and types to be at the ready for whatever order comes, especially in e-commerce, all that variety, just dependent on what the customer orders. And a lot of that inconsistency can unfortunately lead to product damage during shipment, which really is probably one of the biggest challenges and pain points when it comes to e-tailers and having that high volume of returns. It's a significant cost. And there's actually a stat that 81% of online shoppers return items due to damage or defect, according to Power Reviews. So it is a significant impact that can be avoided if you're able to lean into some automation to eliminate some of those errors.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Where do supply chain solutions come together? At ProMat 2025 in Chicago. With over 1,100 of the world's leading manufacturing and supply chain solution providers under one roof, ProMat 2025 puts you face to face with the people, technologies, and game-changing ideas that are shaping this industry's future. From seeing the latest in our industry to learning from some of the brightest in our industry, there is something for everyone at ProMat. Will we see you in Chicago, March 17th to the 20th? Learn more at promatshow.com. And be sure to check us, the new warehouse, out at booth E10643. That's E10643. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you highlighted there certainly what happens right on the back end, I guess, or at the end of the process. A new process essentially starts, right, which is some type of return or dissatisfaction from the consumer. But all of those leads to ultimately sustainability issues as well, right? Because now there's more movement, there's more things that need to happen. There's a huge discussion around returns on, how that's becoming very unsustainable and what that looks like. So I guess tell us, what you identify as some of these like specifically problems around sustainability within the SLAM realm of the warehouse itself.
So looking at like selecting the correct size box, or if it's a box, if it's a mailer, there's just such a variety when it comes to different final shipper options on its own. And you also have to consider, okay, what type of products are we fulfilling? And sometimes it can be easier for fulfillment centers if it's more limited versus say like the Amazons of the world that have such a wide variety and being able to tailor it. So you have that aspect of it, and also there's a fine line between having sustainable solutions, but also wanting to make sure that you're protecting the product during shipment and also meeting customer demand for more sustainable solutions. So I think that's kind of where a lot of our member companies of SLAM within MHI have that focus, because it's no longer just a nice to have. It is something that our customers are demanding. And so we can kind of talk about some of those solutions in unique areas as well later.
Definitely interesting there. Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, for potential differences. I mean, and, one for me that kind of stood out right away, which is in like the SLAM name itself, right? The L there, and I guess we could say maybe now like that silent P too could be one that stands out too, right? But the L, right, in SLAM, stands for label, right? As Joe told us in the beginning of the conversation here, and obviously when we think about a label, a label is being generated typically on some type of paper, and then you're peeling the label off, and there's backing on that, and then that gets discarded, right? So obviously we can lean towards that to see that like, oh, there's a lot of kind of waste in a sense being generated there, maybe opportunity for that. So I'm curious, Joe, if we look at the SLAM industry group itself and just companies that are a part of that group, how are they kind of looking at different ways to make this part, specifically labeling, be a little more sustainable?
Great question. I just wanted to make one comment about something that you and Gina were just talking about.
Sure.
Right? The high volume, it really equals high impact, right? Every product that goes out the door goes through your packaging and SLAM line. So if you make a sustainable improvement, that improvement occurs over every single product that you send out. So from a sustainability perspective, if you're making a poor decision, it compounds. Or if you're making a great decision, that also compounds.
For sure.
So it's a really important for companies that are starting to focus on this sustainability, that this could be the most important aspect of their warehouse operation when it comes to the sustainability aspect. So leading into the labeling portion, every product needs a label. And like you said today, the standard is die cut labels, 4x6, 4x8 shippers that get applied to every box or every bag going out the door. So as a SLAM industry group, what we're trying to do is be on the leading edge of what technology, what materials are available or will be available to make this process as sustainable as possible moving forward. So with labeling, one of the big improvements that has come up recently is the linerless labels. So you have, again, the standard is die cut, right? You have the backing paper that ultimately at the end of the day, it's just there to help to release the label off, and it just gets thrown in the garbage. People don't even think about it. So one of the areas that has really improved over the last few years has been that linerless label. There are still challenges with it. It's still, there's still things that we're working through to make it as efficient and as available as the die cut labels are. But there are a lot of aspects when it comes to that piece of it specifically. You can get you can look upstream from even the actual applying of the label. Well, if you don't have the liner that ultimately gets wrapped up, you're actually shipping less material to your facility because there is less material on every roll. Then you get to the actual applying of the label. An e-commerce company, for example, they might do rate shopping, right? Which allows them to choose, I'm going to use FedEx versus UPS or Amazon or whoever the shipper is, because they have a better rate. Well, some shipping labels have different sizes, right? So you might have a 4x8 shipping label and then a 4x6 shipping label. Well, if you're a company that does that rate shopping, you have to use a 4x8 die cut label regardless of the shipper that you're using. So with a linerless label, you can actually cut that label to size and you don't have to print a full 8-inch label every single time. So there's a lot of interesting things that come with something like a linerless label. It's, again, just a very interesting place. And fortunately, the people who work on the label construction are getting a lot better at it. So it makes it more available and as effective as the die cut labels.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. And I think, to echo what you're saying there about, the high volume equaling high impact. I mean, I think that's so true because, even, I used to do a lot of like continuous improvement projects and operations I worked in, and, you save a couple seconds, right, on one task, but then you extrapolate it out over, a week, a month, a year. It's several hours, right, of savings, which, ultimately obviously equals cost at the end of the day too as well. But I think this is a great, testament to where, because I think there's often been kind of this narrative, and I think it's changing a little bit, right? But this narrative that, if we go green or we become more sustainable, it's going to cost us more money, right? But in a sense, like, we look at this, I mean, there's cost saving aspect to that, right, in a sense as well. And you're becoming more sustainable as an organization overall. So I guess from the sustainability aspect as well, I think another part within the SLAM process is certainly the packaging itself, right, before it gets to the label, whether that's from the box perspective, the dunnage perspective, the tape perspective, everything that's going to protect that product, as Gina has been talking about here. So I guess, Gina, I think you're a packaging, right, fan here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that aspect and, what opportunities are there around the packaging itself, or even, what are some of the innovative things that people are doing?
Sure. Kind of touching on the label perspective, but from an internal operations standpoint, there is also the ability to print the license plate, which is that unique barcode that represents all items within the multi-item order, directly onto a paper banding material. So benefit of that is elimination of the extra step in the process, reduction of the label and liner in that case. And then also when you think about the end customer recycling standpoint, it's all one piece. So you don't have to worry about any additional steps from a recycling standpoint. But like I mentioned before, we're a pretty fun, innovative group of people on the SLAM team, and just wanted to highlight a couple of examples of unique ways to be more sustainable. One being reducing the amount of air that's being shipped on each truck. One way to be able to do that is obviously by right sizing your final shipper, but also how are you efficiently loading all of the final shippers into the truck to be able to maximize full capacity of the amount of orders going into each truck. And really the benefit there is being able to have less trucks on the road, and that significantly impacts the reduction in CO2 emissions.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point there too as well, because it's, even though the truck is not necessarily a part of the operation in most cases, right? Some companies obviously do own their own trucks as well, but most of the time we're talking kind of a lot here about, parcel shipments and things like that. Typically it's going on to like a FedEx or UPS trailer or a regional carrier or something like that. And, there's a lot of opportunity there, like you said, to reduce the amount of air within that package and ultimately reduce the amount of air that's going into that truck. And over time, we talk about high impact, right? Over time, reducing the amount of trailers you're ultimately using, right? And, you're shipping, 25% air in a trailer or something like that. That's not good.
One other example I did want to mention is in my realm of banding. I would say historically, paper banding material used to require a layer of plastic in order for it to adhere to itself. And now there is 100% plastic free paper banding material out there on the market. So it's just another example of how some of these regulations really drive innovation on our end. And so being able to offer something that can help reduce the use of single-use plastics is definitely growing in popularity as well.
Interesting. Definitely good to know there. And you bring up a good point there as well around, sustainability, and some of these innovations are kind of being maybe pushed a little bit or driven by some regulation changes, right? Certainly. But I guess tell us too, what do you see as companies are coming up with these different ways of doing the things that we've traditionally done and looking at it from a more sustainable aspect? Do you see a lot more influence from companies themselves asking for different types of solutions, or do you see it from kind of the consumer pushing this? Aside from regulations, obviously, like where we have to comply, right?
Yeah.
What other influences are kind of helping these solution providers to kind of push their product forward or come up with new ways to do traditional things?
I would say all the above. You
Okay.
said what's impacting it is definitely a combination of regulations and consumer demand. And really, when you backtrack to when COVID hit, everybody was getting all this mail on their doorsteps. And so I think that's really what kind of sparked a lot of this green initiative and really demand from customers saying, no, we want our brands to do better and stop shipping us a box in a box and all the foil fill inside it. But Joe, wasn't sure if you had anything else that you wanted to add with that.
Yeah, I think consumer behavior is also a huge portion of this, right? Especially as, sustainability becomes more top of mind. Consumers can vote with their dollars. And
Yeah.
if they get, like Gina mentioned, a poor opening experience because I just got a bag full of bags with each individual item wrapped in a single-use plastic bag, there are consumers out there that may decide, I'm actually not going to purchase from this company again because I didn't like this experience and the fact that I'm throwing away all this plastic. So that has to be a serious consideration for especially, right, the e-tailers and, who are they selling to? In the United States especially, the sustainability regulations are not as stringent. Of course, I think they will probably get there, which, Gina, maybe it is worth talking about some of those EPR initiatives that have been released recently. But again, it's really important for any e-commerce type company, anyone who's shipping direct to consumer, to consider the buying habits of the people that they sell to and how the packaging itself and the experience and how that relates to the same sustainability impact. Again, the consumers vote with their dollars. And if you want to sell to the younger generation that's up and coming and they care about sustainability, then that needs to be a priority for your business.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can see out there too. I mean, there's even like, I see on LinkedIn all the time, and I see like on Reddit as well, people posting, they get this small, tiny thing in like a huge box, right? Or, all this extra packaging and things like that. And I think the most recent one I saw, actually, I think was very funny, it was this guy ordered actually boxes, like moving boxes, but I guess they set it up in the way in the system that, was the size of the box when it was, expanded and built, right?
Oh no.
So he had like 20 or 30 large shipping boxes like on his driveway, and each one of them had like one single moving box in them. Which goes to show like, how much of like just an impact, right, that can have. Because you think about these like 20 large shipping boxes, how much space that takes up in a truck too, and all these things. And the customer obviously thought it was, ridiculous enough to post a video about or something, right, to social media.
Right.
And, it's just kind of, it goes to show like that impact there. So Joe, you mentioned something in there about EPR regulation that Gina may want to talk about. So Gina, tell us what that's all about. I don't know what that is.
Sure. The extended producer responsibility. I would say in general, just to kind of go back to what Joe was saying, is that in general, how it's gone is Europe will have very strict mandates when it comes to sustainability. And then here in the US, if you are a global company, you're already addressing it there, and that kind of trickles in a little bit to the US. Or it's companies that just really want to promote that, yes, we are taking this seriously without being forced to. I would say with EPR, it is in several of the US states, but there's a lot of uncertainty of what does that actually mean to me as a business owner, of how are they going to track things and all of that. So really what I've seen is it's just been noted as, okay, these regulations are probably going to be coming. Let's see what we can do to adjust our current operations and what incremental things can be done to try to be more sustainable.
So as an example, I think one of the latest ones was New Jersey came out with, I don't know if it's written into law yet, but it's part of the process now where basically extending the responsibility to the producer to say, you can't ship a box that's, Gina, help me with the percentage. I think it was like,
I think it was, it had to be 60% full, right?
Right. Yeah. Something like that. So again, it's these types of regulations that can come from the top down to encourage companies to make those changes. And, you'll get fined if you don't do those things. So again, it's one of those really interesting things that is starting to occur at a state level in the United States.
Yeah, interesting. And I remember seeing that as well. Like it was a couple months ago that kind of came out. And I'm in New Jersey myself, so I thought that was pretty interesting. But I guess I'm curious, from either of your perspectives here. I mean, something like that comes out, right? And, whether it's like 60% or whatever the percentage is based on the regulation, but not every operation, right, or every company is at the same level of sophistication, right, and being able to really understand that or have even like a harness on their data to even say like, oh, well, we don't even know like what the how full our box is, right? Let alone maybe some other metrics like that other companies would know, right? So I mean, if somebody's in that position, I mean, how do they start to go about, and like what should they look at first to figure out like how do they get a handle on this and make sure that they can be in compliance, or even know that they are or they're not?
Yeah, I would say in general, that's where leveraging your relationships with either like systems integrators, us within our SLAM membership committee, that's really the benefit of like MHI and these trade shows, of being able to collaborate. Nobody has all the answers right now, but I would say even just starting with incremental ways that you can try to become more sustainable, because once you set that baseline, then it's easy to see, okay, we're heading in that right direction, and it's going to look different from fulfillment center to fulfillment center.
Mm.
And like you said, based on volumes, right, it's going to be different for everybody. I would encourage everybody to actually go to mhi.org/slam specifically. We're, as an industry group, we're constantly, working on different resources that are released for free, right? Anyone can go download them and read them. In fact, Gina and her team on the sustainability subcommittee are working on a 101 document as we speak, which will have a lot of those valuable resources to say, hey, here's where you can start. The first thing that comes to mind for, when we're talking about things that you can do tomorrow is just at least start thinking about the materials you're using, right? Because if you're using all single-use plastic versus using paper versus using, cardboard boxes, right? Of course, it's going to be different for everybody and which products they're using. But if you start thinking about the materials, then you can start thinking about, okay, if automation is in my future in my operation, well, I know I want to be using, recyclable paper products. Okay, well, what automation do I need to put in place to support that material decision? So I think for anyone who is starting off on this journey, start thinking about materials, and then that'll lead you down the path that you need to go.
100%. That's exactly what I was going to say as well. Because even just if you have plastic, it doesn't mean you can always go to paper, but maybe you can introduce PCR materials, post-consumer recycled poly materials. Or if you are able to use paper, but you need to have virgin fiber for a structure standpoint, there's associations like the Forest Stewardship Council that set global standards of how to be able to use the resources of the forest more sustainably. So 100% agree, Joe. It's looking at the materials is a great way to see what incremental changes can be made just to help on the path of being a little bit more sustainable.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's a great tip there. And I think, Joe, too, I mean, it's a good point too, where, if you change some type of material, you have to, consider like, how does that impact maybe automation you're using already existing or what you're planning to use in the future? And are there any, anything connected to that in a sense within your workflows or your equipment, whatever the case may be, that will have some type of impact there. And, I think it's definitely, we're all using packaging, right, in some way. So that is an easy thing to kind of look at and see like, okay, well, how can I, look at my packaging a little different, whether it's, going for more of a right size packaging solution or just changing the type of box you're using or even like the type of tape potentially or adhesive or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity within that to make some changes which don't necessarily involve huge investments in automation equipment or things of that nature, right? So I think that's a great call out there as kind of a low-hanging fruit for people to kind of get started in a sense and dip their toes in the sustainability pool a little bit in a sense and check the temperature. And typically, you're going to see cost savings from that as well, which I think ultimately is attractive to everybody, right? Yeah.
I want to make a quick comment on that, Kevin. I think it's really important, especially for people that have thought of sustainable packaging in the past as an additional expense, is if you haven't looked at different materials, go look and go get some quotes for it, because it is amazing what I'm assuming they're chemists because I don't know who else does the material stuff, but our chemists and whoever the really smart people working on packaging are getting really good at this stuff. They're getting really good at the materials engineering and what is required to make this stuff, right, effective in your operation and sustainable, right? It's not one or the other anymore. It's both. Mm-hmm. So if anyone in the past has thought that, sustainable packaging is going to be more expensive or not work as well, please reconsider.
I think that ties into the equipment piece as well, because a lot of packaging companies and other SLAM areas, they specifically design their equipment to be used based off of being flexible of what material you're looking for, because it's not always a one size fits all. So you can maybe start with a semi-automated solution and then migrate into a fully automated system. But it's not just the equipment cost, it's being able to have increased throughput, it's being able to reduce some of that labor charge as well and having the consistency. So it all depends on how you categorize your ROI, but definitely a lot of opportunities for being able to look at new innovations when it comes to packaging materials.
All right. Very interesting there. And I think, obviously, some great insights there and also some tips on how you could start to become more sustainable, this week, right? As you're listening to this. So very interesting stuff with you here, Joe and Gina. Really appreciate you both coming on the show and talking to us about the SLAM industry group, as well as just being able to create more sustainability and what's happening out there in the market in regards to that within that SLAM part of the workflow. And also we definitely appreciate the addition of the silent P too as well there, Gina. So thank you for that. Yeah, go Gina. And so if people want to get in touch with the SLAM industry group or learn more about some of these other opportunities, what's the best way to go about that?
I would say you can reach out, go to the SLAM website is mhi.org/SLAM. That's where we're going to be continuing to release all of our resources. Sustainability is one of them. We have a SLAM 101 document. So we know that there's companies out there that, again, maybe they're just starting their automation journey. Obviously, the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world, they know what they're doing. But we're really here for the companies that are growing. They maybe haven't been automation in the past. Or they're just starting to think about, what does automation look like for me? And if they've never heard of SLAM, this is the first time they've heard SLAM, go check that out. We have a 101 document that walk you through each part of that process, things that you can think about. And we're also working on things like, simple ROI calculators, best practices, checklists, and, some other things related to the digitization of SLAM and data and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good resources there. So that's probably your best place for it.
And you can also see all of the member companies as well. Okay. And stop by our booths at ProMat, Modex, always presentations out there. We also have a new LinkedIn page that you can follow as well. So a lot of different opportunities, but someone at MHI can also connect you.
All right. Awesome. And we'll definitely put the links to all of that stuff so people can find it at thenewwarehouse.com as well. And we'll put it in the show notes here too for wherever you're listening or watching. So once again, thank you, Joe and Gina, for joining me. And thank you for contributing your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.